Kia ora and welcome everyone to the 2024 Retail Leaders Forum. It's great to see so many people here today. I see many familiar faces, but for those that don't know me, my name is Chris Wilkinson. I'm the Managing Director of First Retail Group, Retail Strategy Business. We've got around 180 people here today. I think that kind of shows the appetite from our sector to reconnect, to share ideas, to look for inspiration. We've got people here from across New Zealand. We've got people here from Australia. Thank you very much to those that have travelled today. Thank you for everyone who've taken their time out of their day, out of their year to come along. Chatting to participants this morning before the event started, it was great to see the spectrum, the many different categories that we have. We've got suppliers here. We've got businesses from across the consumer-facing sectors and consumer-supporting sectors in terms of delivery, etc. I want to just highlight health and safety aspects just to kick off with too. So if there is an emergency, please look for the direction of our conference team and the hotel staff. Our exits are behind us, across here, and out into the main foyer. Our bathrooms are into the main foyer. Leave the room and to your right. Today we are using Slido. I think most people will be very familiar with that, but it is a fantastic solution because you can send through your questions on the fly. They're anonymous. Take some time now to set up your phones, putting Slido on there and using the code RLFNZ24. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. You'll have seen many of those stands out in the foyer, but we welcome today KPMG, Chrome OS, Echo Portal, New Zealand Post, Quantifill, Afterpay, Salesforce, Enable, and Argon and Company. So businesses that have a direct relevance and opportunity for your sectors, please take the time to connect with them during the three social situations we have: morning tea, lunch, and afternoon tea. The Connect Media team here who've organised this event are committed to making the event experience enjoyable. Please approach them, please let them know if there's anything that they can do to make your experience better today. And the videos and content from today will be available, so please look out for those emails and share them with your teams. And lastly, I want to mention that today's event, particularly the questions and the themes, have been very much shaped by last year's event. So a lot of those themes and those questions you're seeing coming through are possibly from yourselves, but if you were at last year's event, yes, there was that opportunity, and that's what's shaping today. Our first session, we welcome Stephen Kane, who is the former Chief Executive Officer of Coles Supermarkets in Australia. Stephen's travelled to New Zealand today to speak to us. Our first session is a fireside chat. Just to explain a little bit about Stephen's background. So in 1999, at 34 years old, he became the youngest CEO of a FTSE 100 company at Carlton Communications, which owned ITV and Technicolor in the UK. In 2003, he was appointed Managing Director of Coles Supermarkets in Australia for the first time. Sales and profitably improved in Australia, and he had its first self-scanning checkouts and three-tier house brand strategy. Stephen subsequently entered the world of private equity with Pacific Equity Partners and led the acquisition of Coles Group for Wesfarmers in 2007. In 2018, Stephen was again appointed CEO of Coles Group to lead its demerger from Wesfarmers. Over the following 5 years, stakeholder value improved with the restoration of profit growth, upper quartile TSR, Coles became one of Australia's most trusted brands, a global leader in sustainability and record diversity. Supplier and team engagement scores. Stephen retired from Coles in 2003 and has been 2023, and he's been travelling with his family since and trying to improve his golf score. Welcome to the stage, Stephen.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Kia ora.
Stephen, it's great having you here. Thank you very much for taking the time. I think certainly the supermarket topic is at the top of our media at the moment. It's certainly probably part of your life over the past decade and highly topical. So, of course, it applies to all of our retail sectors, not just our FMCG.
Yeah.
So during your tenure at Coles, the world underwent some of its most seismic challenges of the modern day. We faced the challenges of COVID, our challenges around workforce. What did you prioritise during this time to maintain Coles' market leadership?
Yeah, well, we had all of that in Australia, and then we had the bushfires and the floods as well, and it really felt like you were going from one crisis to another. I think when you're a leader of a business, you always have to have your own framework for how you stay calm and try and simplify things, not just for others around you, but for yourself. And I've always tried to sort of think about things in three ways, which is the strategy, and is it simple, particularly in a retail organisation. Long words don't cut the mustard. Everybody has to be able to look at right through the organisation, from the support centre right through to the checkouts and so on, and say, I know my role in that strategy, and it helps me make decisions. So a very clear but simple strategy is important, with a very clear purpose and vision that people want to get out of bed for. The second thing is, have you got the team to execute the strategy? And as many people in this room will know, as you climb the executive ladder, so to speak, you spend less time being task orientated, because when you start, you're managing yourself, and so it is about managing tasks. But obviously, as you grow, it's more about managing people and what motivates them, and how you spot gaps in the team and how you develop team members. So the right team to execute the strategy. And then the final thing is governance, and like it or not, the G word is growing all around us every single day, and you have to devote adequate resources to governance, particularly in a large public company. Otherwise, things can unravel pretty fast, and a little bit of smoke can suddenly become, a raging bushfire. So I think about it in those three things, which is the strategy relevant? Have you got the right team to execute it? And have you got all the governance in place to land the thing successfully and within the law? I think what happened with COVID was, not in anyone's crisis management book. I remember I used to run crisis in one of my first companies, and it was a little card with everybody's phone number on it, in case there was an emergency and you weren't at the office, who to call, and that was your crisis management plan in 1990. And of course, you get to COVID, and Australia was one of the first recipients, like it or not, of COVID. And I remember it was a Sunday afternoon, and things had started going off in the stores, and I said to my wife, I said, look, I'm going to have to just get out and see what's going on today. And I went around all the stores and things. I just got back and had this call, and it was Josh Frydenberg on the phone. He was the treasurer of Australia at the time. He said, oh, look, I'm hearing some things that, pensioners can't get access to meat and everything else, and I'm really concerned. And I said, well, you need to be concerned, because I'm concerned nobody's got access to any meat, and I've just been around every one of our competitors, and there's actually nothing on the shelves. And he went, oh. He said, so what are we going to do then? And I said, well, there's a real issue of panic and unrest and everything else, and I think you'd better set up a task force with us all in, because otherwise there'll be different mixed messages going out, and it's going to be really important around simple communication. And he said, okay, I'll get Peter Dutton to call you, at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the next morning said, right, who should be on this task force? As they said, all the key players, plus some of the key government people and the ACCC, because I said, we're going to actually have to start talking to each other as competitors on what we need to do to create, a new rhythm for customers. And, the government did a great job. And I think at that moment in time, as time went on, it very much made me realise that, business has changed a lot over the last, since I've been in business, but it has moved to stakeholder management now. And in this particular, as opposed to shareholder value, it's stakeholder value, and who are the stakeholders at the time. And the government became a very important stakeholder. And unusually, your competitors became a very important stakeholder. And, I'd be on the phone to Brad Banducci at Woolworths almost every night for those first few weeks, because you needed to align, and then once Coles and Woolworths were aligned, then it became easy for everybody to align around what the course of action was, whether it was advertising together, when we introduced sanitisation, when we introduced limits per store, and all these other things. The other thing that happened with customers was, we'd only ever use flybys for the usual, we haven't seen you in a month, come back, here's $10 off your next shop, or whatever, or we notice you buy Manuka honey, here's a special deal on that, you haven't bought it for a while. And it actually became the key point of communication with customers, and they were actually the most opened emails we've ever sent, because they were really concerned about their safety and everything else. And so the whole safety thing and communication with customers, and sort of trying to take the sales element to one side, really took it back to sort of like the Maslow hierarchy, really, which is, it was about, existence. And then as time went on, you realise you can't really run a ICU permanently as the chief executive, and you have to start thinking about how is the business running. And again, in terms of what we talked about earlier, keeping it simple, we really sort of defined it as there's a crisis management team, you try and section them off to one side, but with full authority, and if anything new comes along, come back and let us know. And then the continuous improvement of the business, and then making sure the big strategic projects sort of stay on track. So that was really the key learning for me throughout that process, along with cadence. And cadence of meetings is such an important thing that I probably hadn't given enough thought to in my prior management roles, but I give a lot of thought to now. And in those early days of COVID, it was twice a day at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And how you apply that to the rest of the business is important, because you tend to get into a monthly meeting for this or a weekly meeting for that or whatever, but it's interesting how that actually drives the delivery of the business. And then when you see the digital revolution and how Agile's come along and all that sort of stuff, the fact that they work on a different time scale, seemingly, to the rest of the business, where there's delivery milestones every week, is certainly something that makes you think about the continuous improvement part of the business versus, how do you move really fast in this, fast-changing world.
I think that's a fantastic glimpse into a moment in time that was kind of so unprecedented for the sector. In terms of, so carrying on really from that theme, so what lessons did you learn around strategic leadership, particularly around those times of extreme pressure?
Yeah. I think it is. You just got to be in there at the start, because there's no rule book, and then you've got to try and stay out of it as much as you can and get on with running the business, because you've got other stakeholders to do. But then when something new comes along, like after a certain amount of time, the first new thing to come along was, we've got to mandate vaccinations, and you're there thinking, gosh, I never thought I'd be mandating that 100,000 people have to get vaccinated. And you can imagine the various levels of feedback, from positive to not at all positive to threats to all sorts of things. And at one point, I had to have security outside my home and all the rest of it, because the anti-vaxxers were really quite concerned and quite aggressive. So I think it's knowing when to step back and get back into the business, make sure you set up the processes, and then if anything new comes along where you as a director will eventually be liable if anything goes wrong. How to make sure that keeps shooting up the system rather than getting caught up in the, in the various management layers. Yeah.
I might actually go to the Slido now because we've had some questions coming through. So what do you see are the biggest challenges for the grocery retail sector in the next decade?
I think there's a couple. Certainly in Australia, the infrastructure is not necessarily fit for purpose. And we've seen that time and time again with floods and bushfires and all these other things that happen in supply disruptions. And obviously that was a key focus in COVID, but after it's never truly recovered. And we keep building railways that keep getting washed away every year in what are classified as once in 100-year floods. And so standing back from it all, at a strategic level, the federal government, the state governments, and the businesses need to get together to build a truly sustainable supply chain, probably around the world, but I think that's probably a bit ambitious, but certainly from an Australian point of view, that's a key thing. From a business point of view, I've never been more excited about retail than I am now. I remember first coming to Australia in 2003, and I couldn't believe the supermarkets at that point in time. They were mainly packaged goods, very little fresh food, and so on and so forth. And they were way behind what was happening in Britain at the time or in the USA. And it's great now. I've toured the world a couple of times in the last year, and I can honestly say for the first time ever, the average good Australian supermarket is now better than the average British supermarket, which I never thought I would say. And I'd also go as far as to say by this time next year, the technology deployed in Australia will be more advanced than anybody in Britain as well. And that's been just such a major change over the last few years. What people don't recognise, certainly about some of the Australian retailers, Coles and Woolworths, is they invest the highest percentage of their profits to sales than any other supermarket in the world. And so that gives them the technology that will really make a difference. So if I look forward, how to embrace technology in all of its forms, whether it's DNA for food, whether it's AI, whether it's automation, whether it's the super app, all of these things that are going on around us, embracing that and investing in that, but then making your core businesses more efficient is the key to success. But when I look back, I used to talk, the language around Coles 20 years ago was about moving boxes. Over time, it's become around, much more around customers and food, and that's been helped by things all around us like better food, MasterChef, all these sort of things. And in the future, you're just going to this sort of, individual-based, health-based society that's technology-enabled, which is just, so exciting, and it's just getting. That change is getting faster and faster.
Another question from the audience. What are your thoughts on responding to disruption, e.g. the discounters entering the supermarket sector in Australia?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you look back over the last 20 years, the market share of Coles and Woolworths has been broadly consistent. And the reason for that is significant investment. So at the point of demerger, in 2018, I think Coles was spending around $600 million per annum in capital expenditure. It's now around $1.2 to $1.3 billion per annum. And that's there to maintain and grow the market position and take advantage of technologies that are available to make it more efficient to be able to compete with the discounters. So a couple of examples. There's a Witron automated centre opened last year in Brisbane. That does 4 million, or will have the capability to do 4 million cases a week from one site, and then another one is opening this year as well. So that level of efficiency and productivity gives you the capability to then invest in all of the other things that need to be done. And then Ocado launches in Australia this year, which again has been a 5-year personal journey for me, and again that will revolutionise what happens in Melbourne and Sydney from a home shopping point of view. So home shopping is obviously here to stay. It's slightly profitable at the moment, but this technology will give you the capability to deliver 40,000 SKUs in full on time, which is the only shopping system that will deliver that anywhere in the world. And what it means is, if an ordinary supermarket stocks 20,000 SKUs, the extra 20,000 SKUs are all more tailored. They're either more health, they're either, international foods. It's a good opportunity for, any suppliers here from New Zealand to be able to access, Kiwi customers in either, Melbourne or Sydney. So that's going to be a very exciting development. So there's part of competing with discounters, which is around, they sell 2,000 products, Coles and Woolworths sell 20,000, 10 times more, but everyone gets focused on one thing, which is the price. And what you've got to do is have your entry price tier as close to them as you possibly can. It doesn't need to be matching, cent for cent, but making sure you've got that entry price point covered off, and then how you deliver value above and beyond that, because they've had 10% of the market for a long time. Obviously they're growing, but it's the Australian market is very different to some of the other markets that you see in Europe and America, and part of it is that Australians want a great fresh food offer. They do want brands as part of the mix. They do want home shopping, all of those type of things, but you've got to you've got to deliver value as well.
I followed the Ocado story very closely and followed your journey with it too. But I must say that opportunity around those additional SKUs is probably something that sat under the radar for many, particularly for New Zealand businesses that are establishing in Australia or want to establish in Australia. So that's an exciting opportunity.
It is, and that won't happen overnight because these hives are, are huge. Many times the size of an ordinary store. And so it'll take a while to just fill it with the basic product that's available in that state, and then after that it goes into various layers of differentiation. So it's not something you're going to see overnight, but the planning is certainly taking place for that extended range in all its forms.
We'll look forward to those learnings this time next year, I guess, of that early stage of development. How do you create a simple strategy that influences decision making when you're a big retailer being attacked by new players on all fronts? We've talked a little bit about this, but any further thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I did when I went back was just to make sure everybody understood what the profitable core of the business was. And you can look at the profitable core of, any business, but the way we looked at it in lots of different ways, but the way we looked at it was to say, okay, if you look at the stores, where does the business make the most money? If you look at category, where does it make the most money? And then if you look at the consumer, where does it make the most money today by consumer group, but which consumer groups are growing fastest in the future, and which ones do you particularly want to target? And so it's easy to come into a company and say, I think this is what we should do. We tried not to do that, and we tried to go back to the basics to make sure that everybody was aligned around what the profitable core of the business was, where the loss-leading elements of the business were, what needed to be fixed, and what needed to be left to one side. The other bit that's really important, and it's when you're in a bricks and mortar business, it's different. If you're Amazon, you can afford to make a loss for 20 years and everybody knows you're making a loss and you get valued on sales or some other metric. Unfortunately, Coles has only ever been valued on profitability and its future growth potential. And so when you try to bolt an Amazon on the side, and the Coles online business is bigger than Amazon in Australia, when you try to bolt one of those on the side without losing money and without denting profitability, it's really hard when you look at the future projections and how much you need to invest. So one of the things I was very keen to do at the outset of the strategy was to say, look, we have to invest in all of the new stuff, and we have to bolt an Amazon on the side, and we can have Ocado, and we can have Witron, and we can double our capital investment, but the numbers actually don't add up. And what will happen is the profitability will go backwards because we're still investing in the bricks and mortar traditional world. And so that's when we sort of decided that we needed a $1 billion efficiency program, and those are the ones where you have to make the really difficult decisions. We were the first to make the decision 4 years ago to stop catalogues. That was a really tough decision. If you're in any retail business, that's had a paper catalogue, talking to all the marketeers and buyers around, let's stop that then. That was not a popular idea when that one first floated across a table, but we did it, and all of that money was invested into digital. And still the only company doing that, but the company didn't collapse. It's there, and they've gone. When you go into home shopping and you introduce lots of personal shoppers into store, that's an additional cost to the business. And in some ways, the ordinary shopper is subsidizing, the online shopper. But again, you can't invest in an Amazon operation and have higher costs in store. And so then you have to go to, okay, we're going to have to go to automated self-checkouts. And then the thing becomes, on catalogues, how do you make the digital experiences better than the old catalogue was? Time of day marketing, more versions of the catalogue. And then in the checkout experience, how do you make the checkout experience the best in the world for automated checkouts? But if you don't make the core far more efficient, the digital world is too expensive, and the shareholders won't tolerate it in a normal world.
Beautiful. Another question from the audience. The Woolies and Coles competition is long-standing. So what was your approach to Aldi entering the market? Would you do anything different today?
Yeah, well, I'd had the experience at Asda in the UK. I was in charge of buying for groceries when Aldi, Netto and Lidl all arrived, and we took a very unique approach in those days, which was we did try and price match as much as we possibly could, and Asda became the most successful supermarket for that decade in the 90s in the UK. And I learned a lot from that experience, which is you can't let a price gap, a significant price gap open with a discounter, and you have to find a way of funding it. A lot of the UK retailers have suffered from not doing that. And so one of the reasons why the UK is different is you have 6 or 7 competitors, but there's always one of them in trouble. And a competitor in trouble is usually bad news for the industry, because they resort to a race to the bottom. And you have to try and not get into a race to a bottom, but you have to sort of cover off your competitors and make sure that you've got a great value offering.
Wonderful. It's great seeing that comparison between those markets and just those differences. What role can or should retail be playing to tackle climate change?
Yeah, I mean, every business has got a role to play. In Coles, it's sort of hand in hand with Australia, really, because it's a big business and it's an important business there. It's been 110 years old. It employs 1 in every 100 Australians. It's got 8,000 suppliers, most of which are Australian. It's got millions of Australian shareholders and pensioners. So when you look at the influence it has, it's a significant operation, and so it's codependent with Australia. And so if businesses like Coles don't sort of take a lead on sustainability, then it just won't happen. And obviously the hard part is how do you prioritise sustainability? And again, thinking through the priorities, it was regulatory first, efficiency, things that pay back quite quickly, which is things like solar and all those type of things. And then from a customer point of view, it's what's the 1, 2, 3, and obviously climate change is on their mind, plastics are on their mind, animal husbandry and food waste. And so again, going down that list and sort of knocking it off. And if you've got a strong own brand program, which Coles does have now, it helps because you can take control of the supply chain, and you can make a bit more inroads into some of those areas than perhaps you can do if someone else is in control end to end.
Walmart went from brick to mortar to a digital marketplace that turned the business around. What are your views on the transformation of bricks and mortar to digital? Yeah,
it's interesting. Walmart had a few goes at this, as you probably know, and spent a fair bit of money on the way. The good thing about Walmart is, and I know Walmart well because obviously Asda was sold to Walmart in the end, and I spent a fair bit of time with them. But the thing that was good about Walmart is they were paranoid about Amazon, and that's all they talked about in a lot of meetings was how they were going to compete with Amazon. So they had the vision to know that because they were mostly a general merchandise business in those days, but doing better in food, they could see that general merchandise was moving online, and Amazon was the going to be the key threat. And they had several different goes at it, and they've made it work. When we looked at our digital strategy, I mean, the thing I spent a lot of time on when I first got in, well, two things. One, it was obvious digital was going to be important, and there was going to be a lot of money at play. And so before I joined Coles, I went off to INSEAD and did the digital transformation course. And whilst it's only quite a short course, it does give you a much better setup coming into a job. And that's what I'd say to everyone in this room is, don't leave technology and all these new things to somebody else who's a specialist. You have to be across it as part of a leadership team to have the debate around how to invest in there versus what gets spent in the rest of the business. And then you've got to find yourself someone really good. And in fact, the guy who runs the Coles digital program came from Walmart, and he ran Walmart China digital operations. And all this stuff is not for gifted amateurs. You've got to have somebody who really knows what they're doing in this space, but you've got to have an executive team around that is asking the right questions and making sure that they're held to account with the money that's being spent, because a dollar is a dollar, but you can spend a lot of dollars in that space relative to the conventional world.
Fantastic. It's interesting seeing the Warehouse Group here has now essentially shuttered their marketplace, but Tesco's about to launch their marketplace, so they are looking at developing a model that will be highly competitive towards Amazon.
Yeah, and there's lots of ways of doing it. If you look at Marks and Spencer at the moment, they're highly successful at the moment, and they've approached it slightly differently, which is obviously they've reinvigorated their food offer and their clothing offer. They've gone younger and to more family orientated. By the way, if anyone goes to London, take a look. It's always been quite good at food, but it's absolutely on fire is the wrong word. It's actually fantastic. But anyway, what they did was they went out and bought a few brands of the past and have reinvigorated them, like Jaeger and all these other things, and then they've got a bit of a marketplace going on as well. But I think at the core of it all, whether you're Walmart, whether you're Coles, whether you're Marks and Spencer, your core offering has to be good in the first place before you attach all of the bells and whistles and other distractions to the outside.
Wonderful. We've got time for one last question, and I think, which one would you like to choose, Stephen?
How do you work with engaging people for retail jobs and ensuring reskilling is fast enough to follow the transformational need? That is a really good question, and something we spent a lot of time on. And clearly, we had a 10-year property plan for the group and a 5-year detailed plan, but behind that has to be a people plan of how many people are going to be in every department for the next 5 years, and then you see where your gaps are, whether that's systems architects or whatever the thing of the future is, and you have to plan far out for these things. And we spent a lot of time on the graduate program, which is highly successful part of Coles. But then it's always looking at things like IT, is how you get more women into IT, more job sharing, how you get them skilled up in the first place, and how you provide ladders for everybody. But by the end of I think we're the first major organisation in Australia to get to 40% of women in leadership. There was a big focus on diversity right throughout the organisation. But you've got to make sure, if it's important, that it's in people's balanced scorecards, because it's one of the few ways I found of making things happen, which is your strategy cascades through the organisation, and you've got to make sure that the right KPIs are in everybody's scorecards to actually make sure that you get some traction throughout the organisation, not just around the boardroom and not beyond.
That last theme, I think, will resonate right across our audience. It's a big challenge, I think, our workforce at the moment and the changing dynamics.
And I think I've just said I've been around the world a few times in the last year, and there are some really common themes that emerge as you go around, developing and developed countries, and workforce strategies, and where's everyone gone is definitely one of them. I was talking about earlier, homelessness is another massive thing as you go around. The cost of living crisis is global, and there's not a lot of, and then the housing crisis, affordable housing. These are common themes in almost every country that you've been to, but there don't seem to be a lot of winning strategies, and there's not enough focus around on what's actually going to drive growth and productivity to pay for everything that needs fixing. And you're in danger of just having an inflationary environment where people talk about the prices going up rather than the growth that pays for everything that needs fixing in this new world. And not that anything's wrong in what's happening, because the people who are paid the lowest in every country deserve to be paid more, and they're the ones that are most impacted by the cost of living crisis. So all these things need to happen, but there just isn't the money in the system to pay for everything, and that comes from, in the future, growth and a proper growth strategy around sustainable infrastructure, future growth industries like renewables and and health and all those type of things, digital. But everyone has to come together to agree what those strategies are, and then go, like you would in a business. Once you've agreed it, you just put the foot down and you go for it.
That's a perfect way to end our conversation, and a perfect start, I think, to today's session. I think it really shows the kind of, this is where we're at, this is where we want to be. Thank you, Stephen, on behalf of all of us here today. Thank you for making the trip to come and see us. Thanks for sharing your ideas, and thanks for starting our event so well.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.